My cheating girlfriend said she'd rather be with anyone else, so I helped her create a dating profile while she watched. What started as another one of Riley's dramatic outbursts became the moment I realized exactly how little our 3-year relationship actually meant to her, and honestly, how little I'd been respecting myself by staying in it. I met Riley at a craft beer festival in Austin 3 years ago, back when I thought her sharp tongue and complete confidence were attractive instead of exhausting, and somehow convinced myself that her constant criticism was just her way of pushing me to be better rather than tearing me down systematically. Riley worked as a yoga instructor, teaching classes twice a week at some boutique studio in the trendy part of town, while I pulled 50-hour weeks as a civil engineer designing bridges and water treatment facilities that actually kept communities functioning. She had this particular way of making cutting remarks about being too good for our relationship, always casually mentioning how she could easily upgrade to someone more successful than my steady but apparently unspectacular engineering career, as if my job securing public infrastructure was somehow beneath her part-time stretching sessions. The night everything changed, I was hunched over my laptop at our kitchen table, finishing up critical inspection reports for a bridge project that was already 3 weeks behind schedule due to weather delays and permit issues, when Riley stormed into our apartment like a hurricane of designer athleisure and wounded ego. She was furious that I'd missed her friend Madison's gallery show, some pretentious art exhibition featuring photographs of abandoned shopping carts that she'd been talking about for weeks like it was the cultural event of the century. "You care more about your stupid concrete and steel than you do about me," she screamed, her face flushed with the kind of self-righteous rage that comes from someone who's never had to work late to keep the lights on or understand that some responsibilities can't be rescheduled around social events. I tried explaining that infrastructure deadlines weren't optional, that real people depended on these projects being completed safely and on time, that the bridge inspection reports weren't something I could just blow off for overpriced wine and artistic interpretations of urban decay. But she cut me off with the cruelest, most revealing thing she'd ever said in 3 years of increasingly bitter exchanges. "I'd rather be with literally anyone else than waste another day with someone who thinks building bridges is more important than supporting his girlfriend's social life." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke, and something inside me just completely clicked into place with crystalline clarity. I closed my laptop, looked at her standing there in her $100 yoga pants with her arms crossed and that familiar expression of disgusted superiority, and walked calmly back to our kitchen table. "Okay," I said with the same tone I used to explain load calculations to confused clients, opening my laptop again and pulling up a dating website. "Let's fix that problem right now." Riley's confident smirk faltered for the first time in months as she realized I wasn't going to argue, beg, or launch into my usual desperate attempts to explain why my career mattered. "What are you doing, Marcus?" she asked, her voice suddenly uncertain and stripped of its usual condescending authority. "Helping you find literally anyone else," I replied matter-of-factly, already clicking through the registration process. "Since you're clearly so miserable here with me and my bridge-building priorities, let's get you set up with someone who can give you what you actually want. What kind of photos should we use for your profile?" I pulled up 3 different dating apps with the methodical efficiency I usually reserved for complex structural calculations, creating accounts on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge while Riley stood behind me in stunned silence, probably expecting me to crack and beg her to stop at any moment like some desperate romantic comedy protagonist. Instead, I approached this like any engineering project that required careful planning and attention to detail, asking practical questions about her preferences and relationship goals with the same professional detachment I used when interviewing municipal clients about their water treatment facility requirements. "What's your ideal age range?" I asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I methodically filled out her basic information with the thoroughness of a permit application. "And are you looking for something serious or just casual dating? We should be completely honest about your intentions from the start to avoid wasting anyone's time." Riley initially tried to play along with what she assumed was some elaborate psychological bluff that would end with me breaking down and fighting for our relationship like every other argument we'd had, but I remained completely businesslike throughout the entire profile creation process, even suggesting we use her most flattering photos from Instagram to maximize her match potential and attract the highest quality men available. I scrolled through her social media feed with clinical objectivity, selecting shots that highlighted her yoga instructor physique and that genuine smile she used to give me back when we first started dating, before everything became an exhausting competition about who was settling for whom. This one from your trip to Colorado last summer really shows off your adventurous side, I said matter-of-factly, adding it to her dating profiles. And this studio shot from your advanced teacher training perfectly captures your professional yoga aesthetic. We want to attract quality matches with genuine relationship potential, not just random guys looking for hookups. The bio section required more creative writing, so I crafted compelling descriptions that emphasized her yoga instructor certification, her passion for organic cooking that I'd been financing for 3 years, and her love of local art scenes that apparently took priority over my career deadlines. I made her sound like the cultured, spiritually centered woman she actually was when she wasn't busy systematically tearing me down for having a stable but unglamorous engineering job that paid for her lifestyle. I even took the time to optimize her search preferences based on my intimate knowledge of her taste in men, setting specific parameters for height, education level, and career ambitions that would filter out the obvious time wasters and attract exactly the kind of successful professionals she claimed to deserve. There, I said with satisfaction, hitting publish on all 3 profiles simultaneously like launching a new construction project. You're officially back on the market. Let's see what kind of upgrade options are actually available out there. Within literally minutes, her phone started buzzing incessantly with match notifications, the dating apps lighting up like a control panel as dozens of interested guys responded to her carefully curated profiles with likes, super likes, and opening messages. Riley watched in growing panic as message after message poured in from men who looked exactly like what she thought she wanted, finally realizing with crystalline clarity that Marcus wasn't fighting for her at all. He was genuinely helping her leave with the same systematic dedication and attention to detail he brought to designing load-bearing structures that kept bridges from collapsing. "Marcus, what the hell are you actually doing?" she whispered, scrolling through the overwhelming flood of interested men with wide, increasingly frightened eyes. "Exactly what you specifically asked for," I replied with calm finality, already moving on to organize her incoming messages by quality and potential compatibility. "You said you'd rather be with literally anyone else, so let's find you someone else who meets your standards. This guy David looks particularly promising. He's a financial advisor with his own practice downtown. And Tyler here works in pharmaceutical sales, probably makes decent money based on his photos. Should I help you craft some engaging opening responses to get these conversations started?" With Riley actively chatting with her growing list of matches and seeming genuinely excited about her romantic prospects, I began quietly separating our shared finances with the same systematic approach I used for complex project budgets. And the numbers revealed a financial reality that was somehow even worse than I'd suspected during our worst arguments about money. I spent an entire weekend going through 3 years of bank statements, credit card bills, and expense tracking apps with forensic precision, discovering that I'd been covering nearly 70% of our total living expenses while Riley contributed minimally from her sporadic part-time yoga classes that barely brought in $800 a month on a good month. The breakdown was absolutely staggering when I laid it out in a detailed spreadsheet that would have impressed my most demanding engineering professors. I was paying our entire $1,500 rent for an apartment Riley had chosen because it was walking distance to her favorite coffee shops. All utilities including the premium internet package she insisted on for her social media activities and virtual yoga sessions, car insurance for both vehicles even though she drove a newer model. Then mine, groceries that averaged $400 weekly because she only bought organic everything from Whole Foods, and the endless stream of expensive takeout from trendy restaurants that Riley ordered whenever she didn't feel like preparing the elaborate meals she'd pin on Pinterest but never actually cook. The subscription services alone were bleeding me dry in ways I'd never fully calculated. Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney+, 3 different yoga apps, 2 meditation platforms, Spotify Premium, Adobe Creative Suite for her Instagram content, and a wine club membership that delivered $70 bottles monthly that Riley claimed were essential for her sophisticated palate development. I immediately canceled every non-essential streaming service and subscription we'd accumulated over the years, keeping only basic internet and my engineering software subscriptions that were actually necessary for my career advancement. I stopped ordering the expensive Thai and Mediterranean takeout that Riley loved, those $40 meals that had become our default dinner solution 3 nights a week because cooking felt like too much effort after her grueling 2-hour yoga sessions, and started meal prepping simple but nutritious bachelor meals that cost a fraction of our usual grocery bills and actually provided better nutrition than Riley's Instagram-worthy but impractical food choices. Riley's attempts at emotional manipulation fell completely flat as I responded to her dramatic sighs, passive-aggressive door slamming, and pointed comments about the declining quality of our lifestyle with helpful suggestions for better dating app conversation starters I'd researched online during my lunch breaks at the engineering firm. You know, David the financial advisor sent you a really thoughtful message about that hiking photo from Colorado, I'd say while heating up my homemade chili, completely ignoring her theatrical huffing about having to eat leftovers instead of $30 organic grain bowls delivered by food apps. You should ask him about his favorite trails around Austin. Shows genuine interest in his hobbies and gives you an excuse for an active first date. My newfound financial clarity was genuinely liberating in ways I hadn't expected, saving me nearly $800 in just the first month while Riley spent her evenings hunched over her phone at our kitchen table, managing multiple dating conversations that I had helped her initiate with the same engineering-level efficiency I brought to project management. I slept peacefully for the first time in months, no longer lying awake stressed about credit card balances or wondering how we'd afford Riley's next spontaneous purchase of essential oils, designer workout clothes, or overpriced superfood supplements that promised to enhance her spiritual energy. Meanwhile, Riley grew increasingly agitated as she realized that her dramatic departure threats weren't having their usual effect of making me scramble to win her back, that I was actually sleeping better and seemed more relaxed and financially secure than I'd been in years of our relationship. "Don't you miss our nice dinners out?" she asked one evening, watching me enjoy a perfectly seasoned stir-fry that had cost me $6 to make instead of the $60 we'd typically spend at her favorite organic fusion restaurant downtown. "I miss a lot of things," I replied honestly, taking another bite of food that actually tasted better than most of our expensive restaurant meals, "but I definitely don't miss the financial stress that came with them." "How did your coffee date with Brandon go yesterday? He seemed really interested in your yoga background and sustainable lifestyle choices." Riley went on her first date with Tyler, the pharmaceutical sales rep who had seemed absolutely perfect during their extensive online conversations but turned out to be completely condescending and obsessed with his luxury car lease payments and quarterly commission bonuses in ways that made my steady engineering salary look humble, stable, and genuinely respectable by comparison. She returned home that Friday evening expecting me to be jealous, concerned, or at least desperately curious about how another man had treated her on their romantic dinner date, but instead found me comfortably settled on our couch with my laptop, researching one-bedroom apartments near my engineering office and genuinely asking how her evening had gone with the same supportive interest I'd show a friend or roommate who was navigating the complicated world of modern dating. "It was fine, I guess," she said with obvious disappointment, clearly hoping for some kind of emotional reaction that would indicate I was struggling with jealousy or insecurity about her dating other people. Tyler spent the entire 3-hour dinner talking about his BMW lease payments and how much money he made last quarter selling anxiety medications to overworked professionals. He kept checking his phone for urgent client calls and had the audacity to ask me to split the $160 bill after ordering an expensive bottle of wine without even consulting me first. When Riley tried to vent about Tyler's obvious character flaws and materialistic obsessions, probably expecting me to feel vindicated or superior about her disappointing dating experience, I helpfully suggested she adjust her dating profile filters to automatically screen out guys who posed with expensive cars or mentioned their income levels in their bio descriptions, and recommended she try casual coffee dates instead of expensive dinner restaurants to better assess genuine compatibility and personality before investing serious time and emotional energy in getting to know potential partners. "Coffee dates are actually brilliant strategy for first meetings," I explained while bookmarking a particularly promising apartment listing in a quiet downtown neighborhood. Much lower pressure for both people, easier to escape gracefully if there's no chemistry or conversation flow, and you can actually have meaningful conversations instead of competing with restaurant noise, pretentious wine selections, and servers interrupting every 10 minutes. Her second date with Brandon, a fitness influencer with professionally photographed abs that could inspire religious conversion and a social media following that Riley initially found impressive, went even worse when he spent the entire evening taking carefully staged selfies with his protein smoothie, talking endlessly about his supplement pyramid scheme and how she could make serious money selling fat-burning teas and detox products to her yoga students, leaving Riley more frustrated and somehow missing the comfortable, drama-free dynamic she'd taken completely for granted during our 3 years together. Brandon kept trying to recruit me into his downline, she complained with genuine disgust, scrolling through her remaining dating matches with obvious exhaustion. He said yoga instructors were perfect targets because we already had built-in audiences of health-conscious women who'd buy anything if a trusted influencer recommended it. Then he actually tried to get me to post about his supplements on my Instagram during our date, like I was already his business partner. I nodded sympathetically while continuing my systematic apartment research, genuinely interested in her dating experiences from an anthropological perspective rather than feeling any personal investment in her romantic success or failure. That's really manipulative and predatory behavior. You should probably start blocking guys who mention business opportunities or side hustles in their dating profiles. What about Marcus, the marketing director who sent you that thoughtful message yesterday? He seemed more interested in your actual personality and yoga philosophy than trying to use you for financial gain or business networking. Riley's third date was with Derek, a successful real estate agent who turned out to be married but currently separated, meaning he spent 2 uncomfortable hours explaining his complicated divorce proceedings and messy child custody arrangements while asking Riley if she'd be interested in a casual, no-strings-attached relationship until his legal situation got completely resolved, which could take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years depending on how vindictive and unreasonable his ex-wife decided to be during mediation. He actually showed me pictures of his kids on his phone, Riley said with genuine disgust and disbelief, then asked if I'd be okay being his friend with benefits until he figured out his life situation and custody arrangements. Like I was interviewing for the position of convenient temporary girlfriend who wouldn't make any emotional demands. By this point, I'd submitted rental applications for 3 different apartments and was genuinely excited about the prospect of living alone for the first time since college, having my own space organized exactly how I wanted it without constantly negotiating every design decision, furniture purchase, or lifestyle choice with someone who consistently criticized my preferences as boring, unsophisticated, or beneath her elevated standards. You're actually getting really good at this screening and evaluation process, I told Riley encouragingly while reviewing lease terms and calculating moving costs with the same attention to detail I brought to construction budgets. Each disappointing date is teaching you what red flags to watch for and what questions to ask up front. Maybe try matching with guys who work in education or healthcare next. They tend to be more relationship-focused and less likely to treat dating like a business networking opportunity or personal marketing platform. At Riley's sister Jessica's 30th birthday party in San Antonio the following weekend, Riley attempted to paint me as emotionally distant and unsupportive in front of her entire extended family, clearly expecting unanimous support for her dating adventures and validation that she deserved someone better than a boring engineer who prioritized work deadlines over her social calendar and artistic aspirations. Instead, when her parents Linda and Robert asked why I seemed so remarkably relaxed and upbeat despite their daughter's obvious romantic exploration with other men, I politely explained that Riley had felt she could find someone better suited for her lifestyle and ambitious goals. So I'd been genuinely supportive of her search for happiness with men who could offer her what I apparently couldn't provide in terms of excitement and financial success. Riley told me she'd rather be with literally anyone else than stay with me. I told her family with complete honesty while Riley's face turned increasingly red with embarrassment and mounting panic. So I helped her create comprehensive dating profiles on 3 different apps to find exactly that kind of upgrade she was looking for. She's been meeting some really interesting guys lately: pharmaceutical sales reps, fitness influencers, real estate agents. Much more exciting and financially rewarding careers than my bridge inspections and municipal water treatment facility projects. Jessica, who had always been the more practical and grounded sister despite being 2 years younger, privately pulled Riley aside during the party and told her she was being a complete idiot for throwing away a stable, supportive relationship with someone who clearly cared more about her genuine well-being than his own bruised ego or wounded pride. Marcus is literally helping you date other people because he wants you to be happy, Jessica said loud enough for me to overhear while I helped their mother arrange birthday presents in the kitchen. Do you have any idea how rare that kind of emotional maturity and selflessness is in men our age? Most guys would be screaming, crying, stalking your social media, or actively trying to sabotage your dates out of jealousy. He's treating you like an actual friend who deserves to find genuine happiness, even if it's not with him. Their father Robert, a retired master electrician who'd built his own successful contracting business through decades of hard work, practical decision-making, and treating people with basic respect, mentioned how genuinely refreshing it was to meet a young man secure enough in himself to prioritize his partner's happiness rather than clinging possessively to a relationship that clearly wasn't working for both people involved anymore. Takes real character and emotional strength to put someone else's needs ahead of your own wounded pride, he told me while we watched Riley's young nephews play soccer in the backyard. Most men your age would be throwing dramatic tantrums, making threats, or trying to manipulate her into staying through guilt trips and emotional blackmail. You're handling this situation like a mature adult who actually respects women's autonomy and right to make their own choices. Even Riley's traditionally conservative mother Linda, who had initially seemed concerned about our unclear relationship status and what the family should expect going forward, admitted that my approach demonstrated genuine love and emotional intelligence in ways that most romantic relationships completely lacked in her decades of experience watching young couples navigate breakups and relationship drama. You're not trying to control her decisions or make her feel guilty for wanting something different from what you can provide, Linda observed while helping me load birthday gifts and leftover cake into my car. That shows real respect for her as an independent person with her own dreams and goals. I honestly hope she realizes what she's walking away from before it's too late and she ends up with someone who treats her like property instead of a partner. The evening ended with Riley's own family unanimously taking my side and openly questioning her decision to throw away a stable, emotionally supportive relationship with someone who clearly valued her happiness and personal growth over his own comfort and convenience, leaving Riley increasingly isolated and embarrassed as person after person praised my maturity, emotional generosity, and respect for her autonomy. Her 17-year-old cousin Emma even asked Riley directly why she was actively dating other people when she already had a boyfriend who seemed absolutely perfect and treated her better than any of her friends' relationships that Emma had observed. But Uncle Marcus designs bridges and important infrastructure, Emma said with genuine teenage confusion that cut right to the heart of the matter. That's like super important work that actually matters. People drive on those structures every single day of their lives. What could possibly be more important or meaningful than keeping entire communities safe? By the time we drove home that evening in my reliable Honda Civic, Riley was sulking in complete silence while I felt genuinely validated by her family's unanimous support for my mature approach to our relationship crisis and their obvious respect for my character and professional contributions. Her own relatives had confirmed what I'd suspected all along, that I'd been a supportive, stable partner who deserved basic respect and appreciation rather than constant criticism, threats of abandonment, and comparisons to men who might offer more exciting lifestyles but probably lacked my fundamental decency and commitment to treating people well. Your family really likes and respects me, I mentioned casually while navigating the heavy evening traffic back to Austin. Jessica thinks you're making a huge mistake that you'll regret for years, and your dad said I remind him of himself at my age, focused on building something solid and meaningful rather than chasing flashy distractions that don't last. Riley stared out the passenger window at the passing streetlights and didn't respond for the entire hour-long drive, probably realizing for the first time that even her own family saw her behavior as selfish and short-sighted rather than empowered and aspirational like she'd convinced herself. Marcus found a perfect downtown loft apartment just 6 blocks from his engineering firm and began the systematic application process with the same methodical thoroughness he brought to municipal infrastructure projects, casually mentioning to Riley that she should probably start looking for her own place too since their current lease expired in exactly 8 weeks and he'd already made the firm decision not to renew their shared housing arrangement regardless of how her dating adventures concluded. Riley panicked when she suddenly realized Marcus wasn't just calling her bluff or playing some elaborate psychological game designed to make her appreciate him more. He was actively preparing for their permanent separation with the same methodical planning and attention to logistical details he used for complex construction projects that required months of advanced coordination and bureaucratic approvals. "You're seriously moving out and ending this?" she asked with genuine shock and disbelief, watching me systematically fill out rental applications, employment verification forms, and references with the same focused precision I brought to engineering documentation that had to meet strict municipal standards. I thought this whole dating experiment was just temporary until we worked through our relationship issues and figured out how to communicate better. I looked up from calculating security deposits, utility connection fees, and moving costs with mild confusion that probably mirrored her expression when I'd first suggested creating her dating profiles. "What issues are we supposed to work through? You clearly stated you'd rather be with anyone else than continue wasting time with me, so I'm helping you find anyone else while creating space for both of us to pursue what we actually want from our lives. This seems like the logical and respectful next step for both parties involved." She desperately tried to sabotage her own dating profiles by being increasingly rude, demanding, and unreasonable to her matches, hoping I would notice her dating struggles and finally fight for their relationship like some romantic comedy protagonist who realizes his mistake at the last possible moment. But I simply suggested she might need a therapeutic break from the stress of meeting new people and offered to help her find a nice studio apartment instead that would fit comfortably within her yoga instructor budget constraints. "Maybe you're putting too much psychological pressure on yourself to find the perfect upgrade immediately," I said while researching affordable neighborhoods that would work with her limited income and transportation needs. "A temporary break from dating might give you some clarity about what you actually want in a long-term partner versus what just looks impressive on paper. I found several nice one-bedroom places near your yoga studio that are only $900 a month with utilities included." When Riley discovered that I had already submitted my security deposit for the downtown loft, scheduled utility transfers, and given our current landlord official 30-day notice that we wouldn't be renewing our lease agreement, she had a complete emotional meltdown that included frantic deletion of all her dating apps and desperate begging for me to reconsider our breakup while I calmly continued packing my engineering textbooks, professional reference materials, and specialized drafting equipment into clearly labeled boxes organized by category and importance. "Marcus, please don't actually do this to us," she sobbed, watching me systematically organize 3 years of shared possessions into separate piles with the ruthless efficiency of a project manager closing out a completed contract and preparing final documentation. "I made a terrible mistake. I don't actually want to date other people anymore. I was just frustrated and scared and said things I didn't mean during a moment of panic about our future." I paused in my systematic packing process to give her my complete attention, the way I would with any client who needed to discuss changing project specifications or timeline requirements midstream through a construction process. "Riley, you've been on 6 different dates in 3 weeks and told me repeatedly how much more interesting, successful, and physically attractive these men are compared to me. You specifically mentioned that Tyler had better career prospects and financial stability, Brandon was more physically attractive and fitness motivated, and Derek understood your need for excitement and spontaneity in ways I never could. Given those clear preferences, why would you want to settle for someone you've consistently described as boring, unambitious, and inadequate for your lifestyle goals?" Her tears intensified as she realized that I had been genuinely listening to everything she'd said about our relationship and her dating experiences over the past month, taking her words and comparisons at face value rather than dismissing them as temporary emotional outbursts that didn't reflect her true feelings or long-term relationship goals. "I was comparing them to you because I was scared of how serious and committed our relationship had gotten," she admitted with raw honesty. None of them actually made me feel safe or valued the way you do. They were all selfish and shallow and just wanted to use me for different things. Money, social media promotion, casual sex without emotional investment. I continued folding my clothes into neat, space-efficient stacks while considering her revelation with the same analytical approach I used for evaluating structural integrity and load-bearing capacity in bridge design. That's actually valuable information for your future dating decisions and relationship standards. Now you know what questions to ask up front and what red flags to watch for in potential partners. The experience wasn't wasted time, it was educational research. The conversation continued for several emotionally exhausting hours as Riley oscillated between anger, desperate bargaining, and increasingly frantic attempts to convince me that her dating experiment had been a temporary mistake rather than a genuine exploration of better alternatives to our relationship, but I maintained the same calm, supportive tone I'd used throughout our entire relationship crisis, treating her emotional distress with kindness and respect while remaining completely committed to our established separation timeline and logistics. Riley moved back in with her sister Jessica in a cramped two-bedroom apartment while I settled comfortably into my spacious downtown loft, finally free from years of exhausting emotional manipulation, constant criticism about my career priorities, and the relentless financial drain of subsidizing someone else's expensive lifestyle who had never genuinely appreciated the significant sacrifices I'd made to keep her comfortable, secure, and able to pursue her part-time yoga career without financial stress. My engineering career flourished dramatically without Riley's relentless negativity about my work schedule, her dismissive attitude toward my professional achievements, and her constant complaints that my dedication to important infrastructure projects was somehow boring and unsophisticated compared to her friends' boyfriends who worked in more glamorous industries like entertainment, fashion, or social media marketing. I got promoted to senior project manager within 6 months of our breakup, largely because I could finally focus completely on my complex municipal projects without constantly worrying about disappointing someone who saw my professional dedication as a personal attack on her social life rather than admirable commitment to public safety and community service. Riley struggled significantly with a seemingly endless string of increasingly disappointing dates that made her realize how genuinely rare qualities like kindness, emotional stability, unconditional support, and basic human decency actually were in the modern dating landscape, while her sporadic part-time yoga classes barely covered her portion of Jessica's monthly rent and living expenses, forcing her to take additional shifts at a local wellness center and eventually a retail job to make ends meet financially for the first time in years. Jessica later told me during a chance encounter at a coffee shop that Riley spent most evenings crying about how she'd thoughtlessly thrown away the most stable, loving, and supportive relationship she'd ever experienced for the fantasy of finding someone more exciting, financially successful, and socially impressive, only to discover through painful experience that most men with those superficial qualities were either emotionally unavailable workaholics, already in committed relationships, or primarily interested in casual arrangements that offered them convenience and physical intimacy without meaningful emotional connection or long-term responsibility. Meanwhile, I was genuinely thriving in ways I hadn't experienced since before our relationship began 3 years earlier, systematically rediscovering hobbies and interests I'd abandoned to accommodate Riley's demanding social schedule, reconnecting with old friends I'd neglected because Riley found them boring or intellectually unsophisticated, and even cautiously starting to date again with a much clearer understanding of what healthy relationships should actually look like when both people genuinely respect and actively support each other's personal and professional goals. About 8 months after our separation, I met Sarah, a brilliant environmental scientist who not only understood the crucial importance of infrastructure work but actually got excited about my bridge projects and water treatment facility designs, seeing them as essential contributions to community safety and environmental protection rather than boring technical work that interfered with social events and romantic dinner plans. Sarah had her own demanding career developing sustainable water management systems, her own complete financial independence, and her own fascinating circle of friends who worked in environmental research, urban planning, and renewable energy development. which meant our relationship developed organically as a genuine partnership between intellectual equals rather than the exhausting caretaker dynamic I'd accepted with Riley, where I provided emotional stability and financial support while receiving constant criticism and threats of abandonment in return for my efforts. The story concluded with me reflecting on the valuable life lesson that sometimes the most genuinely loving thing you can do for someone is help them get exactly what they think they want, even when you know from experience that they're making a mistake that will ultimately teach them to value and appreciate what they already had but took for granted. Watching Riley call her own bluff and discover through natural consequences that the grass wasn't actually greener on the other side had been infinitely more satisfying than any dramatic confrontation, revenge scheme, or emotional manipulation could have been, because it allowed her to learn through her own choices and experiences rather than through guilt trips, manipulation, or emotional warfare that would have left both of us damaged and bitter. 6 months later, Riley reached out through Jessica to ask if I'd be willing to meet for coffee and discuss the possibility of reconciliation and giving our relationship another chance. But by that point I was already planning to propose to Sarah and had genuinely moved on to a relationship that offered everything I'd hoped to find with Riley: mutual respect, shared intellectual interests, emotional support during stressful periods, and most importantly, someone who saw my steady character, work ethic, and commitment to building something meaningful as valuable assets rather than boring limitations to endure until something more exciting came along.